All right, we got Jeff Slobotski here with
Mick Mulhall from Mulhalls here in Omaha.
Mick. How are you today?
Good, good. It's a beautiful day.
Indeed, indeed. Well, thanks for carving out time. Excited to visit with you. Yeah, we've got some fun things in the works between Mulhalls and Millwork Commons, and yeah, just allow folks to get to know you and Mulhalls better as well. So, Mick, I'd love, if you don't mind, maybe just kind of start with your story, your background. Yeah, let viewers know kind of who Mick is and the backstory there.
Yeah, for sure. So family business. I'm third generation here. I suppose there's a couple ways to come into a family business. I was the path of I've just kind of always been here. Started working when I was about 13 because I got in some trouble at school. And to be completely frank, my parents didn't know what to do with me, and I probably took to trees faster than I took to and tree-like things faster than I took to most of the other stuff they were trying to have me commit to. And so, long story short, kind of went to college and moved away, and always did this at some level. And I suppose at some point you realize, what are those things that have always been a part of your life? What those things become kind of maybe even more obvious and more important to you, and then make the decision to commit. And so I moved back about 7 years ago, and so been working here in different capacities since then.
Nice, nice. As a native Omahan, like I grew up seeing the Mulhalls, vans going all throughout town and the amazing work that you guys have done. Yeah, I mean, from afar, it's pretty exciting, pretty intriguing to see what you and your family have done with Mulhalls and frankly, beautifying our city, right? Maybe speak to that. Just, I know there's been a couple pieces in the press in terms of your vision for the future of Mulhalls and some of the things that you guys are planning heading into the next generation. If you could share a little bit more along those lines, that'd be great.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, my grandpa, we talk about it as like, we aren't really like a business family, right? My grandpa was a gardener in Ireland. He grew up on a small farm, and he was literally the groundskeeper of the American ambassador's residence to Ireland. Wow. And my grandma was the cook, and the ambassador happened to be from Omaha, and said, hey, you should move to this town in the US called Omaha. And they did. And he gardened because that's what he did. And I think the timing lined up. He actually ended up being the groundskeeper at Creighton University for a time, and moonlighted mowing lawns. And as we talk about it, he kind of incidentally grew a business. Now, my grandpa was equal parts gardener and immigrant, and so he raised 4 boys, 2 of whom, my dad and my uncle, I still work with. And I think that their journey, so they came back in the early 80s, their journey was more the immigrant side of the story, right? Of legitimizing the business as a business. What does it mean to make something that endures? What does it mean to do right by these people who've committed their careers to this place? And so, my dad studied math, my uncle studied chemical engineering, and like that was very much their way. And so that was kind of the last 30 years. And now I'm super grateful that it was always made clear to me growing up that, what made this place was how much my grandpa cared the way he cared, how much my grandma cared, and how that attracted people who cared the same way they did. And so growing up here, I mean, frankly, this place babysat me in the summers. And so the people that I was interacting with were oftentimes people who were, selling trees in addition to their career, right? Like a lot of our team members, this isn't their primary career, but it's something they do just because they love it and their yard's full. And so when you grow up around people like that, and you learn from people like that, it's a different thing. And I feel super grateful that the foundation of the business is solid enough today that we can really think about, okay, what's that next level, right? What does it really mean to lean into the meaning side now that we have the more technical foundation in place? And how could leaning into that meaning side and that real purpose, right, for us making our community more beautiful, and in doing that, making an argument for preserving and protecting the natural world here, then reinforce this kind of business system that employs a few hundred people now.
Wow, I love visiting with you about it, Mick, because it shows the depth and the level of understanding and passion, frankly, that you and the rest of the team have for the company, for our city, frankly, too. So that's fun.
No, thanks, man. Yeah, it's cool. It's a weird thing to kind of speak for so many people, but
Sure.
I mean, if you stop into our store on a Tuesday night at 7:30 p.m., right? Like, the only reason that someone wants to work, and it's hot right now sometimes, right? Like, the only reason people show up is because they like plants and plant things, and so it makes it pretty easy to kind of keep focused on what's important.
That's good. That's good. Say, one question I like to ask. Where do you get your kind of inspiration or drive from? It could be a particular artist, musician, a book that you're reading right now. Just, yeah, kind of first thing that comes to mind. Where do you get your drive from, and what spurs your creativity?
I'd say I got two things. One, it's always cool. I just had a great conversation last night with the gal who works in our nursery yard, and this is somebody who literally has another career, who chooses to work nights and weekends, doesn't necessarily need to, but chooses to work nights and weekends simply because she wants to talk to people about trees and shrubs and perennials. And when you meet people like that who, right, are doing this thing is technically a job, right? She's an employee of our company, right? But that to her is incidental to why she's actually doing it. Like, her yard is simply full. This is what she wants to talk about. And when you're kind of this world, like, there's only so much people who aren't into this want to hear about it. So you find your people.
Right.
So I'd say that. And then a big part of my role, I think, is kind of helping distill the message, right? Distill a message, a version of the message, right? That a lot of people can come around to kind of like align this thing that is now a business. And I personally think that Aldo Leopold, kind of an early 20th century naturalist, I think, is probably a friend of mine, Greg, turned me on to it. And I think he does a better job articulating kind of what the stuff of this is in like normal words than anyone I've probably ever been in conversation with. That conversation being reading his books. He's not alive. But.
Very good. Very good. That's awesome. That makes me kind of want to dig into. I always am intrigued by kind of where people are, people that I'm inspired by and that are driving the city forward, again, what's driving them in turn. So that's good. I want to talk about Millwork Commons for a minute here. So maybe if you don't mind kind of giving some of the backstory and the context there, how Mulhalls was involved or has got involved in some of the current plans that we have together, and some of the work that you've done around the Ashton building as well.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I mean, it's a kind of a dream project in a lot of ways for us. As people who have committed, us as a team committing our careers to the outside, right, to the natural world. There's this idea, right, this kind of, and maybe like our ideal that there's a certain kind of restoration component to manipulating the landscape, right? What was this? And how can we kind of help maybe steer the conversation closer to what was as opposed to what we think it needs to be, right? I think oftentimes kind of more outdoor activities it's our nature, right, to kind of like want to achieve and to want to kind of like make our imprint. And I think that landscaping done really well sometimes is the opposite. And the really cool thing about the Millwork project for me personally has been the sensitivity to really understanding not just what is the kind of context today, but what maybe was the context, and how do we make space for that? I've heard it called the spirit of the place, but what is the spirit of this place, and how do we maybe more kind of hold space for that, as opposed to kind of impose some idea of what it should be. And I've learned a ton watching all of, the kind of the thought partners in this. I mean, I just had this amazing phone call yesterday with Olson's landscape architecture team about how they're thinking about these kind of, this idea of the Missouri River kind of valley, and what does it mean to have a floodplain forest, and what does it mean to have a kind of separate area being this more oak and elm woodland, and how do those coexist in this small park in the center of this district, in the center of this like city. Right. And at least for me, that's super exciting, and it's in a lot of ways new. It's so old in so many ways, but this thinking is, I think, in a lot of ways new, because right, it takes a certain bravery to be willing to go to that step, to almost presume the success so that you can make it something bigger and better. And that's been really cool to watch.
That's fun.
Play a small part in, yeah.
Yeah, no, and and I know the World Herald did a great piece a couple weeks back, and we'll link up to that in the show notes as well. But that really was quite fascinating for somebody that's not as depth and historical kind of reference on it, but reading about the root space, kind of the soil cells with the trees, and a lot of the work that you guys have thought through is pretty exciting and pretty fascinating.
Yeah, and great on the city too. I mean, yeah, so I mean, long story short, trees, not surprisingly, right, like space for the roots to grow. And we planted some trees that are gonna get pretty big. They're exclamation plane trees, which is kind of like most people would think of as being a sycamore around here, but it's in that genus. And so our team, we feel like we got the opportunity, right, there are these massive holes, call them 10 by 30 foot holes, or they're really big holes with this kind of gridding, this plastic gridding system in them that can support the concrete on top of it, but that still gives the tree enough space to grow to actually a mature size. And it's cool, like what it takes for that to really happen, right, is vision on the part of the developer, guidance on the part of the city, right, and then and so many other people believing in it to actually make it happen. So yeah, I'm excited to see those trees grow. That will be cool.
That's cool. That's cool. What Mick, the last question I kind of want to pose to you is, from where we sit today, obviously this year has been quite wild, right? Just everything we've gone through. But what's most exciting to you for the city? Obviously, Millwork Commons is a project we're working on together, and you and your team are providing some great leadership. But maybe another thing or two thought that comes to mind in terms of what you're excited about as we look forward, the months and years ahead for this city.
Yeah, I think that it's the way the conversation has grown in the last few months. I think that we haven't been able to move around as much, and when you can't move around as much, this is there's this beautiful line in a beautiful poem about trees by a lady named Joy Harjo, and it says, "The deepest rooted dream of a tree is to walk." Right, and you think about, so in our space, right, plants can't move. We as humans have historically been able to move. Plants by their nature, because they can't, they have to make the best of their situation. And I think that at least my perception, we're getting so many more phone calls as a company. We're having so many more people reach out to us, because I think that they're almost being forced, right, to slow down and look around and realize this is it. I actually live in a very specific place that probably at some level needs to be taken care of. And don't get me wrong, a lot of people have been doing that for a long time and have been thinking really hard about that. But just the breadth of the questions that we're getting, and the amount of people that want to know about pollinators, the amount of people that want to know about native plants, the amount of people that are growing vegetables is so encouraging. And when you think about the place itself, I think it's really, really exciting. This idea of really thinking about what Omaha could be as opposed to what it needs to be to help me get from here to here.
Right.
And I enjoy that. I'm from here. I love it here, and loving it here more every day.
That's awesome. Well, Mick, I'm grateful for your time and grateful for your leadership and the team's leadership in making Omaha a better place. And excited to see what we can do together collectively over the months and years ahead. So I appreciate it. Appreciate your time.
Thanks. Thank you, Jeff.